one of the things I'd like for you to do, if you would please, is to type in the chat your answers to this question, which is, what is your description of excellence in AT services? Today, we're talking about an AT team and what that means to you. And here are some answers that people have given in other teamwork workshops that we have done. One of them is, an AT team has positive outcomes. AT increases function for kids. And I love that focus on increasing function for kids. A second similar focus is equal access for all students with disabilities. So all students with disabilities are able to have access to the same information and the same resources as students who are not disabled. Or another goal of your team might be AT awareness at the district level. So I'm going to take just a minute and ask you to type in the chat, what is your description of excellence in AT services? So if you're thinking about some kind of team activity that you do in your AT team, what would show excellence in those services? And Penny, can you open the chat box for me?
Maybe.
We can read them to you too, Gail, if you'd like.
There you go.
The first one came in, AT gives higher ed students more confidence in their ability to be successful in their classes.
So Paula, does that mean you're a higher education person? Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for that. You know, that's one of the things that we work on a lot these days with our higher education students and our students in transition, is that confidence and self-advocacy in their ability to be successful in their classes. Who else has got a thought about what does excellence in education in AT services look like for your team? What is it you're striving to achieve? Kathy, I'm going to put you on the spot. You asked for this topic. What's one of your definitions of excellence in AT services?
I think it's that we never stop learning, because the technology, all of our technology changes so quickly that, you know, we need to constantly be learning what is new, it's out there, but also always looking at what's functional for our students. What do they need? You know, always looking forward and not looking backwards. It's like, oh, I can't fix what's happened in the past, but I can certainly look forward to what is the next transition, what is the next thing that the student needs to be able to do. So
that's a bullet. That's a bullet I want to add to this slide. Forward facing, not thinking about, oh, we can't do it that way because we did it 10 years ago and it didn't work. So, because things have changed a lot. And Iris, I love having you here to talk about at the state level, providing resources to statewide to assist schools and other agencies. So excellence means having some level of consistency. Here we go. Having the knowledge and resources at the district level to help classroom teachers implement AT for all. So a vision of capacity building. And Heather says a plan that allows for success in all areas of AT, from referral, assessment to implementation, in order to achieve independent use. So that focus on the outcome of independent use. Okay, so those are some initial visions of what that's right. Okay. Of what our excellence that we're striving for will look like. And I want you to remember what you said in the chat, because we're going to come back to it a little bit later as we look at a resource that we're going to share with you. But one of the things that we know from all kinds of literature about systems change, about excellence in services, and about my favorite author these days is Michael Fullan, who has written a book called Coherence, which is about how do you make a coherent change, a change that covers all areas of whatever change you're trying to make, and what it takes to have it consistent across an agency or a district. So in order to have coherence, one of the things that Michael Fullen says, and that we know from other research, is that you have to have a vision that defines the direction of your AT services. I know many of you in Wisconsin are pulling together AT teams or modifying AT teams that have been in existence for maybe a very long time. But one of the things that has happened to us because of the changes in technology, because of the changes in availability of technology, and because of just changes in the world, is the direction of our AT services really has had to be changed and modified. For one thing, we're reaching many, many more students. We have the potential to reach many, many more students than we ever reached before, when we tended to think of AT as primarily for kids with severe and multiple disabilities. But so our direction has changed. One direction I see in the field in general is that it's changed to a lot of focus on kids with more academic disabilities. We also have redefined, we have to define for ourselves these days our approach to service, our service design. I don't know about you, but I love to watch HGTV remodel shows, and they're always taking a space and redefining how it works in those shows. And I'm fascinated with that part. So I think we are challenged with AT services these days to redefine how our services work and what they are actually meant to accomplish. And in doing that, we're defining and redefining the roles of AT service providers, building principals and other administrators, classroom teachers, and the leaders of IEP meetings, whether they're special education teachers or case managers or whatever. Your AT vision, what's the same? Oh, there. Your AT vision dispels some misconceptions. If you have clearly defined what your vision is and what you're going to be doing in order to make AT more available and more useful to students with disabilities, you get to it helps to dispel some of the misconceptions that we know about assistive technology. You've all heard these. If you're an AT specialist at all, you know that everybody thinks all AT is very expensive when they actually have AT on the very computer they're watching this Zoom meeting on or something like that. We know that people often think that AT is only for students with very severe disabilities. It blows me away that we still have folks in the field of education in general who think that you only get AT if you're blind, hearing impaired, or in a wheelchair. Because we know that the group of kids that most benefits from the use of assistive technology the most quickly, at least in the research, is kids with academic kinds of disabilities, dyslexia, and things like that. We know that those kids benefit quickly from the use of assistive technology. We still have people who think AT is cheating, and we still have people who think that AT is only the job of an expert. So the way you define your vision, that's okay. The way you define your vision really helps to define the rules around assistive technology and how people will look at assistive technology. And one of the things I think that's really important about having a vision is that it be communicated to as many people as possible in your district, or at least as many people as possible who will be coming in contact with kids who might benefit from assistive technology. One of the ways that I like to look at the idea of having a vision is to talk about whether your services are going to be centralized or you're going to have distributed capacity in your AT services. So the graphic on the left with the four circles and the person with their hand on their head is a person who works in a centralized system. And I sometimes put myself or some other friend AT specialist in there instead of this cute graphic, because when you're in a centralized service for assistive technology, one of the things that often happens is if you say to anybody in the district, what will you do if a student needs text-to-speech in your classroom? If you have a student in your classroom that you think needs text-to-speech, and the answer in a district that has centralized services is, oh, we'll call somebody. We'll call Kathy. We'll call Stacy. We'll call Mary. And that is a centralized service. Now, it's fun to be the person that they call because that allows you to have direct contact with kids. It allows you to have that control that we talked about when we're working as individuals rather than teams. And there are some benefits for some kids to a centralized system of services. But in a capacity building model where the services are more distributed, people are able to share information across the different aspects of their program. And sometimes they don't have to call you in order to make the solution happen. So in a vision for distributed services, like the one we were just talking about, all students might benefit from UDL or accessible resources and strategies. Staff are able to implement these strategies, and support is provided to staff to help them build skills and take ownership. When you have a vision for a more centralized services, I can't see. There's a window over the slide and I can't see what it says. More centralized services respond to referrals when they're student specific. They're often reactive. They wait until there's a problem rather than trying to address access as a general idea. They wait until we say, oh, this student doesn't have access, and then we go in and try and work on it. And expert support may be needed for students with extensive and involved needs. Now, I want to say that I firmly believe we need both kinds of services. We need centralized services for some students and distributed services for others. And then your team works together. You're going to have to make that decision about which is which. So here are some common characteristics of that expert service model. And we've kind of done that already. The expert makes decisions and recommendations and takes responsibility for implementing. Those are some of the other characteristics of a centralized service. So, and here's a flow chart of a centralized services model. So in this flow chart, it's a yes or no flow chart. If yes, do you do this? And if no, you do that. But what you'll see is if it's yes, what are the current interventions, accommodations, and the students using? Are they working? Why or why not? Either you go to a specialist or you say, okay, nothing's needed, and you move forward in an IEP. If we go to the next slide, we can look at common characteristics of, there we go, common characteristics and distributed and capacity building design. So then we're talking about the resources we create are available to all staff. And I think your AT Forward project is a good example of that. There's the AT Forward recordings and the work that you're doing aren't limited to a particular group of staff or anything like that. They're available to everybody who wants to learn it. And in some cases, I suspect there may be people in a supervisory position saying, you know, I really want you to learn this thing. So it's a resource for that too. It's in a distributed model supports but does not conduct basic AT assessment. Basic AT assessment we think can be done by the team members, and IEP team members leads not only the assessment but the implementation. In a capacity building model, we're going to focus efforts on district level training and also district level processes and procedures. Here's a flow chart that's very
But we
similar.
also can't see.
It's okay. Here's a flow chart that's very similar to the one that we saw before, but in this model, and I want to invite you to take a little bit of time and look over this model a little bit. But it's much more focused on building capacity. Where does the group of people who works on a daily basis with this student take assistive technology action? And I think that's the kind of question that as you build your teams, you may want to ask. You're creating a vision for your AT services. And what we want to know is, where does your agency fall on the service delivery continuum? Do you have a centralized model? Do you have a distributed model? And where do you fall on that continuum? Because I know no one who has a totally centralized model or a totally distributed services model. So I'd appreciate it if you type a number in the chat for me, 1 to 5. Where do you feel like your agency falls on the this continuum? Oh, we got lots of things happening in the chat that I kind of missed, but let's
The handouts.
type your number in there. 1 to 5. 2. I'm not going to call your name, but 2. Most fall at a 2. Yeah, there's always that issue of how do you build a team in an agency that serves multiple districts? And that's a whole nother workshop. But okay. So bunch of 2s. Let's
Anybody else? Oh,
it depending on the team at each school. Oh, so
mhm.
not only multiple districts, but multiple schools may be different. I want to encourage you to think about that one a little bit, because I really believe that if your team serves one agency, one district, you might want to have a consistent way of looking at things, a vision for what the district wants to do with their AD services. But, and I'd be happy to talk with you about that more later. I see a lot of 2s on this continuum. So let's go on to the next slide and talk about defining your service model. I get to work with a lot of assistive technology teams around the country, and it's really fun work. Every team is different. Every team has to customize their own services based on what they have available, what their resources are in the district, what people are available, and the knowledge level of those people. And even in your state, and I think here in Oregon too, the geography has a huge impact. The weather has a huge impact about how our AT services are constructed and designed. So I know districts that have centralized direct services model where you, anytime you want to talk about AT, you call one person. Those tend to be smaller districts. If it's a really totally centralized model, they tend to be the smaller districts, because in a larger district, you have to have more people to call. And that becomes a question of how do you distribute the work. I also know districts that have collaborative AT assessment and implementation processes, like campus teams. And some agencies, there's a team of people on the school campus who do the initial work about assistive technology for any kid in that school, and then may move to a more, to call a person who has more skill or to a more centralized model if those kids that they're working with have complicated needs or information that they need information that they don't have. Another kind of model is IEP team capacity building, where where the team believes that every IEP team should be able to do some basic assistive technology services, assessment, consideration, implementation for the students that they most frequently serve. Not every student with every disability, but for the student that they most frequently serve. So I think it's really important to have a shared purpose. And what if you're working as an AT team and you want to increase your effectiveness, having that shared vision can be really important. So I want to encourage you to go back to your team and talk about for which parts of your service model is it your goal to build capacity. You're not going to want to build capacity for everybody in the district all at the exact same time, but are there places where you will want to build capacity for some groups of students or some groups of educators, and other places where you want a more direct service model? These are the kinds of things I've mentioned already that affect how you want to build capacity and how you want to have in some places a more centralized service model. So I don't need to go over that list again. It just came out of my head. One of the things when I get to work with with AT Teams projects is that we tend to talk about what are your team priorities, and then if this were a 3-hour workshop or an all-day workshop, which I often do, I will ask people to take a little bit of time, go over that last slide, and answer this question of what are your priorities for capacity building. These are samples that other teams have come up with in terms of their priorities for capacity building. One team said, we have a lot of different services. We want everybody in our district to know what our family of services is. We want to know the range. We want them to know the range of things that we can do. Another team said, well, it's not so much that as we want all our IEP team members included in our AT services design. Some people said we want to develop an AT evaluation system for all students, something that's consistent. And they didn't say whether or not it was a centralized system or a distributed system, but they said that was what they needed in their district. Develop written guidelines, develop team member expertise, create a system that will make sense of our needs, our demographics, and our resources. One of the things that I'm encouraging you to go back to your team and the next slide, and there you go, and really have this conversation. Are we meeting the needs of our students the way we should be meeting them? Are we using the kind of service design that will work best for us? But one of the things I want to say is that if you are an effective team, or if you're becoming an effective team, those conversations won't always be easy. There are people on your team who want to have things a particular way, that they like the way things are going, or that they feel strongly that something should happen. And it will help in your team building to discuss various viewpoints and discuss changes rather than holding up the status quo. But that may or may not be an easy conversation. So I just want to warn you because I think it's an important conversation, not always an easy conversation. We've provided you with a handout that is this worksheet that you see on the screen. And it is just a format for offering a team discussion. Using the assistive technology services plan for change forum, have a discussion with your team members about what you see your roles are and where you want to go with those. One of the main sections is what do you see as your team's role in these various functions? Do you do all the assessments or only some of them? Are you building capacity in each school? What is your provision of AT devices for all students? We gave this to you in a Word format because my experience with it is that people often have way more than is on this worksheet. This is a conversation starter. Another part of this worksheet is your training needs. What are the training needs for your district? And then the final, that's the first page. And then the final section on the second page is how do you align what you're talking about doing in your AT team to your district goals?